welcome everybody to this very, very special presentation. And I was really fascinated when Phyllis told me that over during her travels over the summer, she went to the Sachsenhausen Concentration Camp, and I just thought this would be a really unique opportunity for us to get inside of a concentration camp and just to be able to see, at least to some degree, what it's like to experience this unimaginable kind of place. And it's kind of symbolic that we're doing that tonight. I had forgotten that tomorrow is the 4th anniversary of the Tree of Life massacre in Pittsburgh. So we're thinking this evening of the 11 people who were killed there and the trauma and the horror of that situation. And then, we also know that anti-Semitism is in no way dissipating, and we have Kanye West and all the outrageous comments that he's been making, and lots of other people around the world, the rise of white supremacy and all kinds of issues which make us mindful of the fact that we have to be very, very vigilant in an ongoing way. So with that, this program is sponsored by our Temple Shalom Emeth Social Justice Committee. And we have a 4-pronged approach this year, and one of our prongs is anti-Semitism. So this is the first event of the year that the Social Justice Committee is sponsoring. So with that, Phyllis, take it away.
I would be happy.
Oh, and after Phyllis finishes, then we'll have time for questions.
Okay, then I'm going to share the screen. And just give me 1 second. I know I'm screen sharing. I'm going back for a second. Sorry. I'm going to try doing that again. Okay, can you all see the sign that says Sachsenhausen? Oh, can they see it?
Yeah, yes. Everybody mute, please. Yes, but don't ask us questions because we can't answer.
Okay. I can't see you anymore, so that's why I'm asking. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is give a disclaimer, because I am by no means an expert on concentration camps. I've tried to learn as much as I could about this particular camp because I was presenting to the temple. The pictures are all photos that I took, except for 2 photos, the map of the camp that you will see later on, and the first photo on slide 34 of Berlin's memorial. And other than that, they are all mine. And the other thing that I should probably tell you is, in order to go through Sachsenhausen and take the pictures and learn the information, I realized that my way of dealing with things was to put up walls. And so it wasn't until I got home and started looking at the pictures that the tears started welling up. Because while I was there, I really did put up walls due to the nature of what you see and what you learn. And that wasn't supposed to do that. So Sachsenhausen Concentration Camp was built during the summer of 1936, mainly by prison labor from prisoners who were transferred from something they called the Elmsland camps. It was located in the town of Oranienburg, which was 35 kilometers north of Berlin, and it was the first new camp that was established after the appointment of SS Heinrich Himmler as chief of police in July of 1936. It was designed and laid out by an SS architect as a model for every other concentration camp that followed. It was intended to symbolize the subjugation of the prisoners to the absolute power of the SS. More than 200,000 people were imprisoned here between 1936 and 1945. At first, it was mainly political prisoners that were kept here, but soon they were joined by an ever-increasing number of those who were deemed racially or biologically inferior: the Jews, the Sinti and the Roma, which were the Gypsies, homosexuals, career criminals, and people they called antisocial, all occupied countries of Europe. Tens of thousands of them died. Some say as many as 100,000 died during this time from starvation, disease, forced labor, maltreatment, medical experiments, or they were murdered by the SS. Thousands of other prisoners died on death marches after the evacuation of the camp. There were about 20,000 women who were among the internees in this camp, and the number of Jewish prisoners varied over the years. The greatest number was believed to be 11,100 at the beginning of 1945, when thousands arrived from Hungary and Poland. Of the 30,000 people that were arrested all over Germany during Kristallnacht pogrom, which began in 1936, around 6,000, mainly from the Northeast and Central Germany, were sent beginning on 11th of November 1938 to Sachsenhausen. Here they were made to stand lightly clad in freezing weather on the assembly yard for 24 hours. No movement was permitted and all medical treatment was refused. Most of these prisoners were released by 1939 if they promised to leave Germany immediately, but not all were released. Once the war began, the numbers sent to Sachsenhausen dramatically increased. In autumn of 1941, the SS murdered at least 13,000 Soviet prisoners of war, many of whom were Jewish, in what they called the neck shot unit. And I will explain that later, and in the testing of their gas chambers. This is outside the grounds of the concentration camp, Sachsenhausen, which, by the way, Sachsenhausen means House of the Saxons, but there's also a town called Sachsenhausen, so I was unable to find out if that applied to what it meant here or just to the town. But this is the Brandenburg University of Applied Police Sciences, and I was taken by this sign before we went into the camp, where it said, "Human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority." Germany feels it is incumbent upon them to teach to their students what happened here, and hope that it doesn't happen again. And the woman who took us around and was our guide used the word murder. And so in some ways that was heartening to hear that they're taking responsibility, but the atrocities that happened here far overshadow all of that. This is the SS troop camp. Behind this building is the entrance to the command headquarters and the prisoners' camp. SS troops were housed and trained here. There was even a casino in here for the officers at one time. In November of 1936, the staff here consisted of 70 SS personnel. By 1944, this number had grown to 277. In 1941, there were around 1,400 guards, SS guards that were here. By 1945, there were 3,356. So this is the map of the camp, the one of the two pictures I didn't take. In order to get into the camp, you went through the gates right here. Well, hopefully you see my cursor going back and forth. Inside the camp, there were gallows inside this building to the left and to the right, where they would have private hangings. And there was also right outside the gates, the public hanging. This is where they had roll call right here in the middle. And off to the right is what they called the small camp, where the Jewish prisoners were in barracks. And we're going to be seeing one of those barracks as we go on. This was the industrial area. At first, this was industry where, and I'll talk later about the shoe factory and whatnot, but later on they used the industrial area to build in the execution barracks, the crematorium, the gas chambers, and those destructive elements of the camp. So this is a gate you walk through at the main entrance. And I don't know German, but I think it says Arbeit macht frei, and I'm probably butchering that. But what it means is work will set you free. And that's what you walk through when you enter. Talk about irony. This is the main entrance to the camp. And this is where that saying on the gates was. Here on the left and here on the right is where they had those private hangings. And on the other side of the building is Tower A, which is the machine gun guard tower, which could see most of the camp all at the same time. Because the camp grew so much over the years, they added more watchtowers as needed. And we will go from there. This is Tower A, the main guard tower. It was where Department 3, which was the protective custody camp of the camp command, was based. Its personnel had direct power over the prisoners. And as I think I said before, total control was their aim. This is the neutral zone, although by no means is it neutral. If you stepped beyond this sign at all into this area behind the sign, what this sign is telling you is that you could be shot without warning, and were. The barbed wire is here, and this is an electric fence, behind which, just in front of this wall, there is a walkway for the guards, but not for the internees. So if you step between here and the fence here, you could be shot at will. This is just showing you up close what that barbed wire and the fence look like. You can see a little bit of the walkway in between. And again, this is just showing you another view of that. This art, when I said there were more guard towers in place where the barracks had stood, if you see where the stones are, barracks had stood there. So you can see a number of them here, and these were created, and you can see the whole place is falling into disrepair, as you can see from the stone wall that is not all there. So before World War II broke out, most of the inmates were German communists or Soviet prisoners of war, including Jewish prisoners. In November 1938, just after Kristallnacht, 1,800 Jews were jailed in Sachsenhausen, and that number grew to 6,000. About 450 of those were murdered. This is the signs that you would see all over the area, Berlin and whatnot, and translation was Judaism is organized crime. So they were already spreading their poison. Now, this is in the small camp. And this is Barracks 38. You can see the number 38 here, and this is 39. And they made these into a museum. The Jewish prisoners were held here from November of 1938 until October 20th, 1942, when they were transported to Auschwitz. An anti-Semitic firebomb attack in 1992 destroyed parts of both of these barracks, and they rebuilt them using original parts and put a museum in here that tells the story of the Jewish prisoners in Sachsenhausen with the aid of their biographies. There were bunk beds down here and in the other side, and so in both ends, and then there were lavatories and cleaning stations in between, and we're going to see some of that. There were a total of 68 barracks in Sachsenhausen. And if you're interested, this is and I can send this afterwards, but there is a YouTube that talks about the prisoner accommodations and making this into a museum. And you can get that on YouTube. And I just wanted to let you know that. Whoops. There we go. Prisoner, this is the water closet. Prisoners were only allowed, apparently they weren't allowed at all. It's just, excuse me. Okay. Prisoners were only allowed to use the water closets and the urinals in the morning and the evening after roll call, maybe occasionally during the midday break. Whenever, they would only have a few minutes. So the sick, the weak, or the older inmates who might have fallen down in the rush were trampled on by others and remained on the floor covered in excrements. Anytime, anywhere, including in the lavatories, the SS staged regular acts of torment. Prisoners who were unable to work had to stand without moving a muscle all day long in this unaired space. Some inmates were actually drowned by SS men in the water closets. And I'm just going to give you a second if you need it to, the information is not easy to hear. So I'll just give a second before I go on. This is the common area that are between the two areas where the bunk beds are. And this is where Rob and I chose to sit aside from other people who were also here and say the mourner's Kaddish for those who had perished and those who suffered here, which was very moving. And we were very glad we had done that. These are the bunk beds. And if it looks like you're seeing reflections, you are. They have plexiglass in front of these bunk beds because they don't want anyone in there as they were original. And so that's what that is. But you can see the three tiers, you know, were three beds on each one. This is the broom and materials closet for cleaning the barracks, and all the materials for cleaning the barracks were here. But also, again, it was a place of torture. The SS guards might lock one prisoner in here, telling him not to move an inch nor touch the walls. Or they put so many inmates in here at one time that there were some prisoners that actually suffocated. Or they made you do what they called the Sachsenhausen salute, which was to squat down, put your arms out right in front of you, and make you stay that way for interminable lengths of time. And this is where, in the mornings, the prisoners washed. At certain times, there were up to 400 men who would be squeezed into the barracks themselves. You only had 30 minutes to wake up, get the rations handed out, wash, and then get to roll call. Consequently, there'd be 8 to 10 people at a time who'd be standing at the two basins, and cold water only would spring up from the middle. Again, these washrooms were another site of terror. SS guards were known to have drowned people in the basins here for washing the feet and other atrocities. This is in their museum, one of the uniforms that the internees had to wear. Every Jewish people were identified by 2 triangles. If you weren't Jewish, you didn't have 2, you might have only had 1. But here's an example of the 2 stars that had to be worn on this uniform to identify the fact that they were Jewish. These are the infirmary barracks. Again, I have to keep saying this, but there were unspeakable acts of violence committed in the infirmary. Compulsory sterilization of homosexuals, castration of homosexuals, murder of patients who they deemed would not recover enough to go back to work for the German cause were murdered. And there were experiments on humans. In fact, this was Mengele's experimental camp. As I said before, this was the camp that all the other camps were modeled after. This is where Mengele first did the experiments that he did that were then sent to Auschwitz and such. One of these cases was that of 11 young Jews who in the summer of 1943 were taken from the arrival ramp at Auschwitz to Sachsenhausen Infirmary for hepatitis experiments. Now, it says that their story is told at the very location where it first took place, but I must have missed that because I didn't see that in the museum. But the 11 boys and young men had to live for over a year during the course of the experiments. And I looked it up today. I tried to find out exactly what happened. The only thing I could find is that the Germans were trying to find cures for hepatitis because hepatitis was decimating their ranks as well. And so they were trying all sorts of different medications to see what would and wouldn't work. Deteriorating living conditions here at Sachsenhausen, as more and more people came, had allowed infectious diseases to spread rapidly throughout the camp, which was also a real trouble for the SS guards. So beginning in 1942, the infirmary served mainly to restore ill inmates to a state where they could go back to the German war effort. Closely related to this policy was the selection and murder of patients whom the SS considered would never sufficiently recover, like I said, for forced labor. This is the Soviet Liberation Memorial that was created in 1961 at Sachsenhausen. The Russian army liberated around 3,000 internees on April 22nd, 1945. Sadly, 300 of those 3,000 did not survive the sickness that they had, and they're buried in 6 mass graves by the wall near the infirmary. This is where the political prisoners were kept. And if you notice back here, there's a wall. This area was walled off from the rest of the camp. It was used as a Gestapo prison. It was shrouded in secrecy and the site of cruel mistreatment and murder. Of the original T-shaped building with some 80 cells and guard rooms and interrogation rooms, only one section remains today. The foundations of the other 2 can be seen, and in 1999, they made a permanent exhibition of 6 of the former cells, which provides information in the form of pictures and history and documents, as well as biographies of inmates on this cell block and what happened here. And this shows you 3 of those 6 cells. This one here on the left was the actual size of the cell. There was hardly any room at all to walk around, and certainly not one to do much of exercise of any kind. This, if you remember who Martin Niemöller is, and for you, those of you that don't, he was the one who wrote the poem that says they came for the Jews and no one did anything, and they came for the Poles and no one did anything. They came for the Russians and no one did anything. And by the time they came to take him, there was no one left. And he was interned here for a while, and in this particular cell. And on the right, it just shows at the time a replica of the entrance to the camp and some of the camp. You can make out the wall on the right-hand side, the fence and whatnot. These are left, they are the actual 3 of remaining of the public gallows. And if you tried to escape, you were definitely hung out here for everyone to see, so as deter others from trying to escape. Okay, what you're seeing here is from the museum, and what this picture on the bottom, this watercolor, is trying to depict was the hierarchy in the camp. As I said, Jews were made to wear yellow triangles as well as one other color, usually red for political prisoner or green for criminal. The two triangles were placed one over the other to form the Star of David. The Jews were at the very bottom of the SS prisoner hierarchy and were treated most brutally of all. Homosexuals were isolated. As Aryans, Norwegians ranked pretty high in the hierarchy, followed by the Dutch. The Belgians and the French were lower down in the rankings. And there were very few prisoners with dark skin, but they attracted considerable attention while in the camp. Initially, the internees were forced to work in workshops and factories owned by the SS in the camp's industrial yard. This included punishment details such as the clinker work, which was the brickworks, or the shoe running detail, which I mentioned before. For the shoe running detail, the Germans had laid out different surfaces, different materials. And they wanted to know how best the sole of the shoe would be so that they wouldn't have to keep replacing them in their army. And so they made the internees march anywhere from 25 to 40 kilometers a day over these different surfaces. That's up to about 24 miles a day. The clinker work, the brickworks, was really feared by all the inmates because it was labeled as a death camp, and a lot of deliberate murders were carried out. So they were afraid if they were sent to the brickworks, they wouldn't come back. Okay. This is a method that the SS contrived, a deceptive means of shooting prisoners in the back of the neck. That's what I meant by the neck shot unit. This particular rod, and it's behind glass because it's the original, dates back to probably before 1945. The killing area consisted of 2 rooms, but in the wall between the 2 rooms, there was a slit in the wall, hidden from view by this measuring rod. So if you were an internee and you were sent into this room, you would put your back up to this, thinking that you were being measured, when in fact, the SS guard who was concealed in the other room would fire a fatal shot through the slit into the neck of the internee. And they played music very loudly so as to disguise what was happening. And that's what I meant before when I talked about the neck shot unit. Sorry, got on the wrong page. This is the building where the prisoner's kitchen was. And there was a prisoner's kitchen and a laundry area. It was formerly out of stone, but they rebuilt it in wood. The kitchen and laundry were among the only stone buildings that were in this camp. The kitchen building, which is where this mural is now a museum. And it, in fact, houses the Book of the Dead, which is what Rob is looking through in this part of the museum. And I tried, this is glass over here to preserve this. I spent an awful long time looking at this, trying to figure out exactly what it meant. I couldn't find anything that explained it anymore, but certainly people are being examined and whatnot, and he's some kind of torture going on. But this is what they would see when they went to the kitchen every day. Okay, this was the execution trench, which was not here when the camp was originally built, but was added a few years later. And there's an area here where all the prisoners would stand and be shot. There's a door, which you see over here on the right, that is right behind this cement here. The corpses were taken, put through here into the corpse room, and out the other side to the crematorium. In 1996 and 2004, several trenches were discovered not too far away from here, in which the SS had dumped the ashes from the crematorium. And in this trench, mostly it was resistance fighters, conscientious objectors, and people sentenced by the Nazi special court. What you're looking at here is gas station Z. It was called Station Z by the Nazis. It was the gas chamber they built with 4 ovens. Well, there was the gas chamber here, 4 ovens here, a shot in the neck installation, and as I said, the gas chamber. On January 31st, 1942, the SS forced a team of inmates to build this station in a section of the industrial yard. It was built solely for the extermination of prisoners. By the spring of 1942, the extermination unit, the neck shot unit, and the crematorium were built. This gas chamber was built in 1943 and used until the end of the war. Now, we don't know how many people were gassed here, because while they kept registrations of the people that were shot and the people that died in other ways, they did not keep any registration of the people that were gassed. On May 29th, 1942, the SS invited dozens of high-ranked Nazi officers to inaugurate this new installation. In order to illustrate its effectiveness and its efficiency, 96 Jews were shot execution style. And this place was called Station Z by the Nazis as a joke. You entered, if you recall, Tower A is where you enter the concentration camp, and you leave murdered through Station Z. And this was a joke to them. This is the ruins of the ovens in the first crematorium at Sachsenhausen. And I just took a couple of different views so you would get an idea. And this, while it's written in a language, it's in English as well, but this is proof. This particular article is proof of the grotesque killings that were done here at Sachsenhausen. In September of 1941, the SS instructed a Czech prisoner to photograph arriving Soviet soldiers. And they had intended to present some grotesque caricature of what they called the Slav subhuman. But this prisoner managed to take the negatives with him when he went on the death march. And they were preserved. And so it's evidence of the largest mass murder operation that happened at Sachsenhausen. On the left, you see a sculpture by German Waldemar Grismek, and it's at Station Z, and it's to commemorate the camp's liberation in April of 1945. And this was commemorated on April 18th, 2021. The camp was liberated by Soviet troops on April 22nd, 1945, with the 3,000 remaining prisoners who were here. The rest of the prisoners, which totaled more than 30,000, were marched off in groups of 400 towards the north and the west. Thousands died in what they now call the death marches. And on the right is a commemorative memorial to all of those who were killed in this horrific camp. And we did indeed leave stones in a number of places as we walked around the camp. And this is the only pictures that are outside of the camp. This is Berlin. And this one is not my picture. It was taken by the person whose words I'm about to read. And this, I did take, this is part of the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. They made it to be like waves when you walk through it. And I was taken by the fact there was a young man named Kenny Arduin, and this is what he wrote after his trip to this memorial. He wrote, "This is located right next to Germany's Parliament building and tells the honest and sobering story of the atrocities committed by Nazi-led Germany, graphically detailing the murder of 11 million people from 1933 to 1945. As horrific and difficult it is to visit this museum and experience this memorial, I found it to be incredibly..." Did I do that? Sorry about that. Am I still sharing? Doesn't matter.
Yes, you're still
thanks.
sharing.
Right, it's fine that you see that. I think I found it to be incredibly worthwhile. I think it demonstrates that Germany acknowledges and takes responsibility for its past and that it has learned from it. The fact that they use the word murder, which you can see here on the left side, in the name shows acceptance of what it is and that there's no justification for what happened. You get the sense that a neo-Nazi uprising is incredibly unlikely here. They are telling a cautionary tale to the rest of the world and urging no one else to make such a terrible decision. And that was the end of his quote. And I say from his mouth to God's ear. And I am going to stop the sharing and listen to what you have to say, or if you have any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you. That was incredibly powerful. And I kind of feel sick to my stomach having just...
I started feeling that way halfway through today, halfway saying it.
One thing that Phyllis didn't mention is that it was 99 degrees when we went through the camp.
Wow.
It added to the ambiance.
Is it, and anybody have anything they want to ask or say? Renee?
I share something.
Yeah.
My grandfather, after Kristallnacht, was Jewish, and he was one that ended up in the concentration camp. He was very lucky, and in this one, he only had to stay a couple of months, and then he was let go, because at the beginning, the main purpose, like Phyllis said, was not killing them at the first, just make sure they never got back to Germany. And so it took a year. I mean, they eventually did get here to the States. He could not go back. He could not help my grandmother. My grandmother had kids, including my aunt, and she had to do everything in order to get them out, which they eventually did. It's a longer story, but yes. And but it was, like Phyllis said, for just a few months, and he was very lucky that he was let go. But it really, my grandmother was really traumatized by the fact that she had to get everyone out, including her grandmother, who was 80 years old at the time, and my aunt. Anyway, so this really was very, I've never seen it, but I've never seen this one. I have seen other concentration camps and visits to Europe, but not this one. So thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you. Val has her hand raised.
Mark has a question.
Oh, Mark, sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. In addition to all the Jews that were murdered, how were the gypsy population and other different minorities chosen to the camps?
Anyone that the German considered to be less than, and gypsies were part of that. I had to look up because I didn't know the names Soma and Sinti and Roma. So I had to look that up.
Yeah, sure.
Anyone they considered less than, anyone who were political prisoners, communists,
Gay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Somebody else would like to ask a question? Martha.
Martha has a hand up.
Yeah.
Martha,
I wanted to say this was really powerful. I have never been to Germany or to any of the concentration camps, and I've certainly, seen documentaries and things, but this is just very powerful, and I appreciate it. I'm sure it took a lot of work to put it together and a lot of emotional work to manage getting through it. So thank you for doing this.
Very welcome. It's it's tough to go through. But we kept after Carnival because we figured I never really had any great desire to go to Germany. And if I was going to go, I wanted it to be meaningful.
Actually, I had an opportunity to go to Germany when I was in my 20s because I was transferring between different parts of Europe, and I specifically didn't want to go to Germany unless I had time to do some experience that would be meaningful for me. So, yeah.
Carnival actually rented a train that took us to Berlin, which is where we met the guide who took us to Sachsenhausen.
excellent. Paul's iPad, I don't know who. The person who has their hand raised, go ahead. Do you want to?
Paul?
Paul,
It's all locked up.
Paul?
No? Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, we're kind of locked up a bit. Yeah. You mentioned how you had your walls built up and you were able to tour the facility that way. Well, we went through the camp at Dachau, and I recall going from the crematorium through these big sealed steel doors. And when I got into the room and looked around and saw the grating on the windows and the showers, I realized what that room was. And there was nothing but like panic. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough and felt ill after that. And it was, really brought it home. It was, that was where they built the first chamber. And you can see the evolution where they had used all of the chemicals in the clothes delousing area right adjacent to it. And then it was just a small step for them to apply it to, murdering the inmates. It was
Horrifying.
Yeah. It took a long time to get, even now thinking about it, it was still disturbing.
Yeah, I was kind of concerned about that aspect of it, but in this particular camp, the walls aren't there anymore, so you don't go in them.
Larry. You want to unmute?
Oops. Yeah, I too was once visited Dachau, and all of the same emotions, and you did an excellent job here showing that camp. The other thing too I wanted to mention is that my father in World War II was a member of the 4th Armored Division, which is the first of the Allied divisions to liberate a camp. And my father never spoke about it. He never talked about it. But my parents were in Washington, D.C. once, and my mom said that when they visited the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, my father just broke down. The first thing he did is when he got off the elevator on the 2nd floor, there was a picture of the camp at Ordruff, which is the camp that he was there when they liberated it. And he froze, saying that's exactly the way I remembered it.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. That was very powerful memory. Other thoughts, comments? Sue, unmute.
Okay, so we had also visited a camp, Stadthof, and I have to say that this camp was so much better preserved than what we saw, but we were on a coach bus and Jason and I were the only Jewish people visiting the camp. So I thought that was interesting, that, and on a positive note, that so many other non-Jews are interested in the history, and hopefully they left, you know, with well-educated, I guess. But yeah, it was a powerful experience, and this was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I was kind of scrolling through my pictures too as I was listening, and yeah.
Thank you.
Brought back memories.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, David.
Yeah.
I'm the first generation. My father was in 5 concentration camps, Buchenwald, Dachau, and Auschwitz. You did a fabulous job, Phyllis.
Thanks.
And my children have gone there to see it. I haven't. And it's incredible to believe I lost my grandparents in Auschwitz. And it's touching. It's a very emotional thing to watch. And it's like so hard to believe. Okay, it's hard to believe that my dad survived 5 years in the camps. It really is. He passed away 4 years ago at 94 from cancer. And my mother was a hidden survivor. She was a hidden child from Belgium, and she's still alive. The nuns hid her in. She was baptized and hidden from family to family, and she's 93 and still alive. But you did a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks for sharing those horrible, powerful memories. And thank you for feeling free to be emotional about it, because I think that's the way we're all kind of feeling. Shelley.
Thank you again, Phyllis. I had 2 questions. Question number 1 is a simple one, which is, it seems that this is close to like downtown Berlin, so it's easy to visit this, you know, if you were to fly in, say, to Berlin.
Yes, it's 35 miles north, 35 kilometers north.
Okay.
So yeah, it took us about an hour to get to Berlin, and maybe another 20 minutes or 25 minutes to get there.
Okay. And the other thing is that I know that you showed that it seems that the Germans are taking responsibility in terms of what they're presenting, you know, in terms of things like that. Were you able to talk with any German citizens and get a feel? You know, did they say anything? I mean, I know that there might be a language issue or anything, something.
Well, our guide was German. And so I had talked with her a little bit. And she also called it murder and a blight on their history and whatnot. But other than that, there really was no time to do that.
Okay.
Because we then spent 8.5 hours in Berlin
Okay.
on a whirlwind.
Thanks. Felsa.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that the Germans are taking responsibility. And I was wondering if you saw any of the stepping stones. There's a group that is putting these stepping stones outside houses where Jews were taken and doing a sort of memorial in front of the houses. I saw one in a small town in Germany, and I came home, I told my son about it, who said he went to high school with a girl who was German, who went back to Germany afterwards, and she was part of this group that's memorializing the places where the Jews were taken.
Quite honestly, did not know that. Would have looked for them.
Yeah, they're little plaques in the street, brass plaques with, I think it had the name of the people that were taken.
Thank you.
I've heard of that before.
Yeah.
Larry.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is I mentioned that my father with the 4th Armored liberated a camp. My brother-in-law is the son of 2 survivors. I never met his father because he died of cancer before my brother-in-law and sister met. But his mother and my father had an instant bond, because one thing I never knew was that when the Allied forces liberated the camps, at first the prisoners there were afraid because there were more soldiers coming in. But for those soldiers that were Jewish, they could talk to the prisoners because they all spoke Yiddish. Mm-hmm. And they could have a conversation and let them know what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you. Martha, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I don't have any personal experiences, but over the years, I have heard of numerous examples of the Germans, both officially and individually, trying to educate themselves, take responsibility. I remember when my parents, when I was young, they had a very close friend who was a survivor who did business in Germany, and my mother wouldn't buy anything German, but he did business with Germans, and his German friends had German friends who, it was clear that they were trying to learn from their mistakes, their horrors, and change things at the educational system. And so my daughter has friends who are German, and they grew up learning about the Nazis and learning about the horrible things that they did. And that's not to say there aren't individual Germans. There's a very strong far right, I believe, neo-Nazi party in Germany in certain sections. There are certainly individuals, but as an institution and as individuals, I think there are a lot of Germans. And I just wish that in America we would own up to our mistakes and educate our kids about the things that we've done. Because the Nazis learned a lot about racism from our country. They specifically, Hitler wrote about, following our model in certain ways. So.
Thank you. Heidi.
Okay, I just wanted to say that, Phyllis, I can see the strength that you had to use to make yourself do this. And the only thing worse than the horrors that were visited upon the Jews and other people, and the kind of thing that is going on all over the world now, is having people say that didn't happen. And so that's the power of witness, and you are enacting that. And that's the most important step I think we can take. But I can see the cost it has on the witnesses.
Beautifully said,
A lot
Heidi.
of courage.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yes. Thank you. And we see in our country, I mean, so every single generation, the Holocaust gets further and further away, and there's less and less of an understanding, and more swastikas all over the place, and just like a total lack of understanding of the connection between a swastika and the Holocaust. And so it behooves us to like Phyllis, to keep the memory in front of us, and to, I mean, I think, I've been fortified in my desire to make this an important part of all of our memories. We just have to keep the memory going.
And to continuing witnessing today, I remember we were talking to the people that went to the immigrant camps on the border, and they were seeing the kids alone in cages, and had the same kind of thing. This horror will not disappear without people knowing about it.
Exactly. Paul.
You're muted, Paul.
Here we go. All right. When you were there, Phyllis, did you see any of the high school tours going through the camp?
Yes.
Yeah, we saw the same thing, busloads of them. They're pretty much required to be educated in what happened. And they bring all the high school students through and teach them of the events that occurred at these camps and why they could never let that happen again. I've traveled a lot in Germany and have a lot of German friends that, they basically all understand and, really
Take it to heart.
Yeah,
They really
they understand their responsibility for never letting it happen again. Unfortunately, it's worse here in this country at the moment than it is in Germany.
Yep.
There was a neo-Nazi group in Germany that a year or two ago that wanted to march through a town, and the town put up great resistance. And they can't use any Nazi symbolism at all. It's against the law in Germany. Yet everyone knew this was a neo-Nazi group that wanted to march through town. When the courts decided that they had the right to march through town, the townspeople arranged so that when they registered the people that marched through the town, everyone that marched through town, the local businesses were donating money for every mile of every person that walked towards education about the Holocaust. And so the people were standing along the streets saying, you're raising money against your cause, just to let you know. I thought it was a good solution.
I kind of remember that was incredible.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Shella.
I want to say thank you for this, Phyllis. I know how hard it was. My brother-in-law, actually, Steve's brother, lives in Berlin, and definitely want to that this history is taught so that we don't have it repeat. And actually, his partner, who is not Jewish, he actually is an attorney, and he works with descendants of those taken, trying to get back the wealth, the art, whatever was taken from them. So there are definitely people there still trying.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, Renee.
You're muted, Renee.
One other personal part, talking about when my aunt went, they got to the US, she never shared anything about what happened with her kids or with us. We often visited New York City. She lived in Flushing. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s or so, and she went to and this is interesting, to the university, to Queens College, and they gave a memoir course. And that's where she wrote the memoir of how they eventually escaped. And that's the first time anyone knew about it. And she, all her life, did resent. She would not do anything, because of that. But the fact that the memoir made a difference in being able to express and do that made a big difference, in her life. And that's when finally her kids learned about it.
Was that published?
Not officially published, no. I mean, we all have a copy. And also with our family, we have kept in touch and we have reunions and we have that we've had, and now Zoom reunions we had going to have. But yeah, no, it was, everyone has a copy, but it wasn't officially published. Yeah.
Can I read it, Renee?
What? Yeah, yes, in fact, yeah. And if you're interested, there's a book, very interesting book, and it's written by my second cousin who got out into England. There are some members of the family that did die in concentration camps, but she wrote a book called Daughter of the Reich, Louise Fein, F-E-I-N. Fein was my mother's maiden name. And that is a wonderful book. We Zoomed with the author, and it really takes the whole thing. If you're interested in reading more about it, it's from the viewpoint of a German who was indoctrinated in Hitler. I mean, came from a Nazi family, and met a Jewish man, and what happened there. But it was, it's something that if you're interested in that, it's very interesting from a different point of view, and to get and very well written.
I read that. It was very excellent.
Oh, you did read that?
Because I told her to.
Oh, you told her to, yeah. Yeah, she was part of, yeah. Oh, and she wrote another book called The Hidden Child. That's about eugenics, but not in Germany, but even though that was the main thing in Germany, US and England and eugenics. But anyway, yeah. Oh.
Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? We're a little over an hour here, so that's probably a good amount of time. But Phyllis, I wanted to thank you so much. I just, just knowing how I'm feeling right now and how I was feeling during just looking at the pictures, I just can't imagine how you felt while you were there in person and how you felt now having to relive it and explain it all to us. I mean, I don't know if I could have made it through that, what you just did in either place.
I'm going to go grab a couple of Tylenol.
Yeah, so we're all very, very, very grateful to you, and thank you to everybody who was here to witness what you said. And I'm going to edit this and put it on my YouTube channel and put the link around so that many others hopefully will watch it as well.